Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, yes, you, and those, friends, family, everybody else, hope that y'all had a wonderful Halloween. You're having a good start to November, and today is a significant show because the off season is officially here. If you were a fan of baseball, one of the best World Series, with some of the best World Series games I can remember in recent memory. It was awesome to see. Congratulations to the Dodgers. Cannot feel more bad than I do for the Blue Jays. Just gut-wrenching to see the Blue Jays suffer losses like that. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers are once again World Series champions. That's happened. It's in the rearview mirror. We're officially in the offseason, and that means, Stephen Tolbert, that we can officially start discussing some moves that the Braves are going to need to make, because they are going to need to make them early and often to make this offseason successful.
What's up, buddy? Yeah, man. So we finally got through it. We got through October. We got through Halloween. We got through the World Series. Dodgers won. Whatever. I don't care. I wanted the Blue Jays to win, but just a confluence of just the most random things had to happen for the Blue Jays not to win that series. Whatever. Dodgers won. On to the offseason. So now we get going. Now it's all the stuff we've been kind of talking about and projecting officially gets kicked off. Today, around like noon, MLB, the official MLB communications account released 134 players officially hit free agency. Of course, for the Braves, that's Ozuna, Iglesias, Charlie Morton, and Connor Siebold was among them. The Braves had added so many guys, it got a little random at the end. But, obviously Ozuna and Iglesias are the big ones. But yeah, so those guys are off the Braves roster. Those guys are no longer employed by the team. Those are free agents, free to sign with anybody they want to on Thursday at 5 p.m. This show, we're going to go through some of the dates, the important dates that you're going to need to know for the offseason, some of the important decisions that the Braves are going to need to make. And all of this is happening pretty quickly. Not only is Alex a typically a pretty quick mover in terms of his main moves, but just, 5 days after the World Series, so Thursday, a lot of this stuff has to be decided upon. So the Braves still need a manager. We're expecting that news quite literally any day. So this, even though the offseason literally is just now starting, this should be a pretty busy week for the Braves.
Yeah, and that's the focus of our show. Mark Bowman at MLB.com wrote a very informative, great article that really broke down the important dates and how specifically the Braves are impacted by each of these notable dates of the offseason. And we're going to run mainly through the ones basically through the end of November. That's really when some of the really important dates occur. And when we're talking about, some important decisions, it's not only on the Braves end when it comes to important decisions to be made. Their offseason is also going to be impacted by decisions that players will make. And no bigger decision will occur. Perhaps the biggest non-Braves front office decision that could impact the Braves offseason, thankfully, is going to be the first one we'll know about come Thursday. But Thursday itself is an important date for multiple reasons. And let's get into that first one. Of course, that is the day where players with options, these club options, player options, things like that, those have to be decided 5 days after the World Series. So that means by Thursday, we will know whether or not Ha-Seong Kim will pick up his $16 million player option. Now, spoiler alert, it's widely assumed that he's going to decline it. But, Stephen, that is an important decision and obviously the first step in what could be one of the biggest storylines for the Braves this offseason. Will they be able to retain in some way, shape, or form Ha-Seong Kim?
Yep. All options have to be decided on by Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. All opt out, if you have an opt out in your contract and you're deciding whether or not to opt out or not, that has to be decided by Thursday at 5 p.m. The whole reason is because when MLB starts allowing teams to sign other free agents, they want the free agent pool set. So they don't want new guys being added after the fact. So that's why they do it all on Thursday at 5 p.m. Options, club options. The team has to decide, are we picking up your option? Are we paying your buyout? We letting you go? Player options, same thing. Any kind of opt-out that guys have in their deals, they have to decide by then. MLB wants the free agent pool completely set at 5 p.m. on Thursday so that teams know exactly who's available and who's not. And listen, you'll hear a lot of this stuff before Thursday at 5 p.m. News will start breaking about different guys. This guy plans on picking up his option. This guy doesn't. The Braves kind of famously don't do that. They wait to the last second to announce anything. I don't know why necessarily, but that's just how they've always done it. There's been times where they announce like an hour after the deadline. They take forever, and obviously everybody knows very little actually leaks out of that front office. So, if we don't know right at 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, we will know shortly after. Obviously, we will do a show that night covering all of that stuff. But yes, Thursday, 5 days after the World Series, is a critical day of the offseason. It is the official beginning of the offseason, but so many of the important decisions have to be made by then, including, and we haven't talked about this a ton. We talked about a little in August. The Braves still have like 11 guys on the 60-day IL. And I counted earlier, to add all 11 back, they still got to clear 3 40-man roster spots. Now, Hassan Kim might be one of those because he declines his option, goes into free agency, but that means they still got to clear 2 more. So they got to DFA somebody, they got to trade somebody, they got to decline somebody's option, but the 60-day IL goes away. That's another thing that happens on Thursday at 5 p.m. The 60-day IL goes away. So all those guys have to be on your 40. You have to have space for all of them. So we will 1,000% certain get multiple roster moves either on Thursday at 5 p.m. or shortly before then. And obviously we will cover it all as soon as the news drops.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to consider when it comes to the 40-man roster decisions that are going on, that also brings to light, kind of, how many potential roster moves that the Braves will have available for them when it comes to them actually making moves, right? Because it's not only about them adding back those 11 guys who are on the 60-day IL and removing guys that they don't want. That's not the end of the 40-man roster, because you're adding back all those guys from the IL. None of them are likely to go anywhere. But then in addition to that, you're going to have to clear room as the offseason goes along.
Correct.
Or additions that you make to the roster. Now, some later dates in November will also help to make room for that. But that's the important thing to understand, is that, yes, the 60-man roster goes away, so you have to initially set what your 40-man roster will look like, but do expect for there to be frequent updates, frequent roster decisions around and because of these dates that we're going to talk about, but also in terms of the things that we're not able to know as of right now, which are the Braves adding players, which we know that they're going to do as time goes on.
Yeah, and teams go super low. I remember a couple years ago, I think it was a couple years ago, the Braves, they did a full purge of their 40-man. It was the year they traded 4 of their 40-man guys to the White Sox for Bummer. And they purged their 40-man roster right at the beginning of the offseason. And I remember at one point, they got down to 26 guys on the 40-man. And obviously you slowly add guys back as the offseason goes, and you get to 40 by the time you get to spring training. But you're 100% right. Fitting the 68-day IL guys on the 40 is just the beginning of the process. Because if you want to if you want to sign any free agents, if you want to trade for anybody, they all have to have 40-man spots. So yeah, we're going to see, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw double-digit 40-man roster spots turn over in the next 2 weeks. It wouldn't surprise me at all, because teams that's what they do in the offseason. They just turn their 40-man roster over. Any kind of the dead weight they carried all season, they use this time to clear it and add new guys. So don't be stunned at all if we get a number of roster moves in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And so that's the thing that we're getting at is that if you have been waiting like crazy for the Braves to start making some key decisions, it's coming. We'll talk about this probably a little bit later on the show, but we haven't even mentioned the fact that likely within the next 24 to 48 hours, we should get some type of update when it comes to the Braves manager position, who they potentially could hire. So plenty to come. Manager decision, further roster changes, Hasakim's decision. We'll get all that and more when it comes to the Braves roster. But Again, that's just the first week. What about other really important dates that will help to shape how the offseason will progress? We'll discuss it in just a moment after a word from our partners.
FT fam, if you want more information about Superpower, I have real life customer Eric Kratz with us right now to explain how you're basically getting the pro experience available for everyone.
$199 is the price, and that's a discount from Superpower. That's a discount from everywhere. You get so much information from your lab test results. Christmas is coming up here soon. You can give this gift to somebody else. Health is the gift that keeps on giving.
Your blueprint activated with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce that price to what Kratz is talking about, just $199, but for a limited time, FT fam gets an additional $20 off with code TAKE20. Head to superpower.com and use code TAKE20 at checkout for $20 off your membership. After you sign up, they're going to ask you how you heard about them, and make sure you mention FT to support the show. Stop only reacting to health problems and start proactively improving your health based on real personalized data with Superpower.
So, Stephen, of course, over the next week, which is the first week in November, we'll probably get a decision on the manager. We'll get further roster decisions as we make room for those IL guys. We'll get an understanding of, not only Ha-Seong Kim, whether or not he'll accept his player option, but maybe start to get an idea of what his next contract will look like and, how much of a realistic possibility is the Braves will retain him. That's week one. Then the next week, we have the general managers meeting. Now, this is, I would say, the less significant of the multi-day meetings that happen within the first 6 weeks of the offseason. But at these general managers meetings, you typically do see a little bit of action. But the main thing is general managers get together and kind of gain an idea, number one, of what MLB will be implementing moving forward that will help their decisions this offseason, but also getting some conversations going about trades and things such as that. So that's week two. Then as we go from week 2 to week 3, a really important, though it's not known yet, a really important date that's not official, but the Braves fans are wanting to pay particular interest to, will be right around mid-November awards season. And of course, the NL Rookie of the Year race, not only can Drake Baldwin potentially win the award, but that extra draft pick. So that's going to be another important date to look at. And then after that, as we get kind of through mid-November, the first real official roster impact date, if you will be November 18th, which will be the day that players will decide whether or not they will accept a qualifying offer. That will be the first date that players will do it. Now, of course, one thing we didn't mention about Thursday, that's the day when teams will decide whether or not to offer qualifying offers to free agents. And then by November 18th, those free agents will need to decide whether or not to accept those qualifying offers. Stephen, when it comes to those decisions, I don't think the Braves are going to extend a qualifying offer to a Marcell Ozuna or Raisel Iglesias or anything like that. But more of interest to the Braves, players outside of the team right now, which of those will be given qualified offers on Thursday, and will they accept them by the 18th?
Yeah, so the Braves aren't projected to hand out any qualifying offers. None of their free agents reach that level. If you don't know, a qualifying offer ends up being a 1-year deal. Right now it's like $22 million a year. It's a really awful system. Actually, I can't believe the players ever allowed this. It basically suppresses, because if a guy gets offered a qualifying offer, so it's usually the top free agents in baseball, as long as you've never had a qualifying offer attached to your name, or as long as you weren't traded midseason, then you can be offered a qualifying offer. And what it does is any team that signs you has to give up a draft pick. And which draft pick it is depends on, were you a luxury taxpayer? Are you do you get competitive balance money? There's different things, but essentially you have to give up a draft pick to sign a qualified free agent, which essentially just suppresses the market for these top guys, it doesn't make any, I just can't believe the Players Association allowed this, but it is a big deal for the Braves because, of course, the Braves have some pretty critical needs this offseason. Maybe the most critical being starting pitching, and guys like Dylan Cease, Ranger Suarez could have qualifying offers attached to their name. And if they do, then the Braves have to give up a draft on top of having to give the guy a contract and be responsible for that entire contract. You also have to give up a draft pick. And, we were looking at it a couple of days ago. There's a really high likelihood that if Drake Baldwin wins the Rookie of the Year and they get a draft pick at the end of the first round, that will be the draft pick they have to give up if they sign one of these qualified free agents. So, and it gets even more complicated if you sign multiple qualified free agents. It's a very convoluted system. I really kind of hate it. But yes, the date you're talking about is obviously on Thursday. Teams have to decide, do I have a free agent that I'm going to offer a qualifying offer to? If so, they have to do it by 5 p.m. on Thursday. And then November 18th, that player has to decide, am I taking that 1 year, $22 million offer by accepting, or am I declining that and going to free agency? And then any team that signed that player would be penalized by a draft pick or multiple draft picks. So yeah, that's a big deal. And then, like you just said, and one thing we didn't mention, there was a trade freeze that happens during the World Series. Teams can't trade with each other. That got lifted today. So a lot of this stuff happens 5 days from now on Thursday, but the trade freeze got lifted today. So teams we could wake up tomorrow to like 4 trades. Teams can start trading with each other now. Teams can't sign other free agents until Thursday. You can sign your own free agents. And we didn't mention that. The Braves could announce a contract for, any of their, if they wanted to do a deal with Pierce Johnson right now and just sign him to an extension, they could announce that tomorrow. You can sign your own guys, but you can't sign other people's free agents, obviously. So that happens on Thursday. But yeah, so the qualifying offer is a big deal. GM meetings, not as big a deal. Some stuff happens there. The winter meetings that are in December are obviously the big ones where a lot of stuff usually happens. But yeah, the qualifying offer is a big day. And unfortunately for the Braves, it's basically determining which players are going to cost a draft pick if they want to sign them in free agency.
An example of that, and also let's back up here a bit. A few clarifying statements. So one thing to understand about the qualifying offer when it comes to the Braves and Marcell Ozuna and Raisel Iglesias, for instance. Mark Bowman pointed this out. It's a noteworthy factor with them. Both of them already received a qualifying offer that they rejected in the past. As a matter of fact, the last free agent that the Braves signed that had been offered a qualifying offer was Marcell Ozuna between the 2019 and 2020 season. Today is November 2nd, which, by the way, happy 4-year anniversary of the Braves winning their World Series. Woo! But also, you were just talking about the fact that you could re-sign your own free agents. Well, it was a year ago where the Braves redid the deals for Ronaldo Lopez as well as Aaron Bummer. So, yes, you could see some restructuring, re-signing of players. So that activity could happen as well. So there's going to be activity across baseball at some point in time. But I want to get back to the November 18th date, when we're going to have an idea, first Thursday of knowing which free agents are going to have qualifying offers tied to them, and then after the 18th, knowing whether or not they're going to accept it. The fact that the Braves could potentially get that extra draft pick, even if they were to potentially lose it when signing a qualifying free agent, the fact that the Braves are likely going to have a bigger infusion of talent through this draft because of how they're going to be able to pick, and especially if they get the extra draft pick, and also if they're a bit more willing to spend this offseason than they were last offseason, all those factors could make it more of a reality. The Braves may be aggressive and go actually make a big contract offer, especially to one of these pitchers. I'm not saying it's likely because it's not necessarily how Anthopoulos usually operates. I'm just saying that factors are there that could make it make more sense than this offseason than in previous ones.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you end up losing that pick, the Drake Baldwin pick, getting it is still a very big deal because you don't have to give up your second round pick. I mean, yeah, you immediately lose it, but you saved yourself, another pick in the process. So it's still a massive deal, even if they end up giving it up. And I will say a lot of teams treat the qualifying offer as basically they treat it as there's a handful of guys they view worth giving up a pick for, and a handful of guys who will get the qualifying offer who they don't view giving up the pick for. And it's really, they kind of scratch their name off the list. It's kind of disqualifying. Like they're like, all right, well, this guy now costs a draft pick. We do not think he's worth a draft pick, so we're just going to cross his name off our list. We're just not going to, go after this guy this year. But, there are guys at the very top of the market that are so good, are so dynamic, are so impactful to your team. Like when the Mets signed Juan Soto, or, there are guys that when you sign, they are so impactful that giving up a single draft pick to sign them is just the cost of doing business. So it doesn't necessarily hurt the very top guys. It kind of hurts that next level of guys who are good enough to get the qualifying offer, but aren't good enough to really justify spending a draft pick on top of the contract to go get that player. I think Nick Pivetta got dinged with it last year and ended up having to sign a really late deal. I think that's right. I think he signed. Yeah, he got surprisingly got a qualifying offer, and it's kind of just like attached to your neck the whole offseason. And he had to wait a long time to get a contract. And that will happen to it. There'll be a couple of players who were right on the line of getting one or not getting one. They'll get one, and it's really going to suppress their market. And that's why I really don't like this system at all. I think it's pretty clunky. I think it's punitive to guys who finally get to free agency. But yeah, it's out there. And November 18th is the day we will learn which free agents are going to have a qualifying offer attached to their name.
Yep, here on the Hammer Territory podcast, we're discussing important dates and decisions that the Braves will be looking, at themselves making, at players making, free agents making, so on and so forth, that'll kind of help mold the way that the offseason goes. So, we just talked about the fact that, the qualifying offers, with you've got to offer them as a team to your free agents by, the fifth day after the World Series. Those players have until the 18th to decide. But one final date in November that is certainly important to keep an eye on, of course, is November 21st, and that is the tender deadline. Now, this we've done a show on. We've discussed it in full. We discussed the 9 players that the Braves potentially, will look to make decisions on when it comes to tendering contracts. Now, the important thing to understand about that date, it's simply the team officially making the decision that they are looking to offer a contract to this player, or that they're not going to offer a contract to this player. It is not on that date putting in stone what that player will be making as the season goes along. That will happen later in the offseason, and even then, another factor that matters is if that player even makes it to the season. Stephen, if you'll elaborate on that a bit more, that November 21st date, yes, it's important, but it's not a full A to Z process that's that day. It's the beginning of a process for many players that will be on the Braves roster.
Correct. So the tender deadline is essentially, it's the end of the line. If the Braves decide they do not want to tender a contract for a player, that player becomes a free agent. It is the beginning of the process if they do decide they want to tender a contract, because then you have to go through the arbitration process, which of course is you pick a number, I pick a number. If we can't agree, then an arbiter picks one of the numbers. Talk about another clunky system in baseball. Arbitration is a disaster, but whatever. But just as a recap, and we've done entire shows on this, we've had some spare time here lately, in case you haven't noticed. So there's 9 guys the Braves have on their potential tender list: Jake Fraley, Vidal Brujan, Eli White, Nick Allen, Alex Manoah, Dylan Lee, Joey Wentz, Joel Payamps, and Jose Suarez. So those are the 9 guys who are currently arbitration eligible on that date or before. And keep in mind, any of these guys could be non-tendered, DFA'd anytime between now and then. It's just by the 21st, you have to have made a decision on all of them. Either I'm going to tender them a contract, which means they stay on the 40-man, they stay on the roster, or I non-tender them, they go into the free agent pool, that 40-man spot opens up. So that's what the importance of that date is. We won't actually learn, the players that do get tendered a contract, we won't actually learn what their salary is until like middle of January, sometimes even later than that if the player goes all the way through an arbitration trial. So sometimes they get announced in February. So that date is specifically for these players will be tendered a contract and stay on the roster. The other players will be non-tendered, go into the free agent pool. And again, that they do that early in the offseason so that teams understand which players are going to be in the free agent pool, so that we don't have players being added to the free agent pool in December, in January, and February when teams have already made their decisions. So that's just why they do that.
And it's important to note that even though there is a date in the future where the Braves are going to decide whether or not to tender these guys a contract for 2026, they still have control of them right now. And a good example of that was 2 years ago. So the Braves, if they were to have already made the decision on some of these guys, you could see one or two of these guys potentially moved off the 40-man when the Braves start adding back those players off of IL. Or if the Braves see a guy on another team that they do want a spot for, they could trade these guys to that other team, and that other team would then make the decision on these guys. Perhaps there's another team. If the Braves don't want to keep Jake Fraley, maybe there's another team out there that likes the potential in him. They would want him for their outfield depth. The Braves could use him in a trade, even though they haven't made the decision of whether or not to tender him a contract. So there's still a lot of creativity, as Alex Anthopoulos has shown in the past, that you can do with these guys, even if you've not made the decision yet of whether or not you're going to tender them a contract for the next year.
Yeah, and this is the time where you can open up a chunk of 40-man roster spots at one time if you want to. It's just a very easy way to, you got 9 guys to potentially decide on. You could say, all right, I'm keeping 4 of them and I'm non-tendering 5. Well, boom, you just opened up 5 40-man roster spots in one fell swoop. So you'll see this a lot. This is a day where there will be a ton all over baseball, a ton of roster moves. You'll see trades, you'll see, waiver claims, you'll see a ton of stuff, because every team in baseball has to do this. So, and every team in baseball usually has 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 arbitration guys that have to be decided on. So yeah, it's a big day. And then one more that we didn't mention on the 18th, which is the day for the qualifying offer, is also the day where you have to decide if you were going to add one of your prospects to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. And the Braves actually have some interesting names. We'll probably do a separate show on this because it's a little more prospect driven, and we stay out of those waters unless we have an expert with us. But in order to protect a guy who's been in your minor league system for, I think, 5 years, in order to protect them from the Rule 5 draft, you have to put them on the 40. And again, those are more 40-man spots that have to be created. And every year there's usually 1 or 2 guys in the minor league system that get protected. And then the Rule 5 draft happens. So that's an important date. The Braves do have some interesting names that could be protected. That's just more roster moves that we'll see. So as Shawn laid out, the first 2 weeks in November, there is a ton of like nuts and bolts roster things that happen, all because MLB wants to try to get the free agent pool as set as possible early in November so that all the teams know which players are available so they can make their decisions on rosters for 2026. So the next 2 weeks are going to be busy as hell. Even if the Braves didn't have to hire a manager, plus potentially an entire coaching staff around that manager, which they do, it would still be a very busy time. It's just a busy time in baseball. The offseason moves, the big stuff moves very slowly in MLB's offseason. The small stuff and the nuts and bolts stuff like this moves very quickly because all this stuff happens within 5, 7, 10 days of the World Series ending. And it's all going to come in a flurry in the next 2 weeks.
And also that Alex Anthopoulos, more than others, usually likes to do some of his heavy lifting early.
Yeah.
So that he will want to make sure he gets all the necessary formalities out of the way to position himself to see what can occur. But, as we're wrapping up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast, don't want to go without mentioning that now that the World Series is over, the Dodgers again, first back-to-back champions in 25 years. As many know, every day that we've gone without a manager being announced for the Braves, it seems more and more likely that the spotlight could be shining on current Dodgers bench coach Danny Lehman as being the potential candidate that the Braves are really focused on. And we could see that made official early this week. That is another factor in all of this. Not only Danny Lehman coming over as potentially being the manager, but what is his coaching staff going to look like? Are we going to retain any of our old guys? What new guys are coming over? Could they come over from the Dodgers? Could they come over from other teams? That's going to be another very interesting component to watch for this offseason, because based off who you bring over from different organizations or the Dodgers with Lehman, if he's the guy, does that potentially tie you to other trade candidates or free agents that we really haven't thought of before? So that's going to be another critical component of the offseason, especially early on, to help kind of formulate how things will go.
Yeah, I mean that, we've all been kind of connecting dots. And if the Braves wanted to hire George Lombard or Ryan Flaherty, those guys, their postseasons have been done for a while. They could have hired him at any point and they haven't. And so just, natural connecting of the dots, it seems like they've been waiting on something. Well, the Dodgers season finally ended. It ended in a World Series. Danny Lehman is now available to sign anywhere. Do not be surprised at all. The Braves are kind of famous for Monday morning news drops. Do not be surprised at all if we wake up tomorrow morning and the Braves have a new manager, and it's Danny Lehman. So all of the kind of tea leaves are pointing in that direction. I do think they want to get it done before all the player movement starts on Thursday. It just makes sense to try to button that up and the coaching staff up. Like trying to do all that stuff while also like the offseason is fully going seems like it would be a pain in the ass. So I would think the Braves would want to get this done in the next couple of days before Thursday and all the stuff starts. But we'll see. Alex moves in weird, mysterious ways sometimes, and we can't always explain it. And sometimes, it's not just his decision. Obviously, there are people on the other end of this that have to make life-changing decisions. And am I going to move across the country and become a manager? Or, it's not as simple as just picking up a phone and getting the guy you want. So, but I do think they're going to try to make a decision on this as quickly as possible. And again, do not be surprised at all if we wake up tomorrow. By the time you're listening to this podcast, the Braves already have a manager for the next guy in line for the manager of the Braves.
And I will say this, when we talk about, Alex Anthopoulos at times kind of operates, away from conventional thinking. While many of us are potentially anticipating Danny Lehman being the decision, this also could simply be the fact that we've not seen anything official yet, them simply getting to be able to fully vet Danny Lehman, talk to him. And after doing that, if they decide to go with someone else they've talked with, you could see that as well. So while we anticipate it's going to be Danny Lehman, it's not necessarily guaranteed, because they could simply talk with him, get, fully satisfy their interest with him. And if he's not the right guy, pivot to someone else. So that's the whole thing. What we may think is going to happen and what we know will happen in some shape or form, it may not necessarily happen in the way that we think. So that's kind of the excitement of the offseason. But the whole point is this: the talk's over. The speculation will still go on, but we're finally going to get some solid answers to some of the big questions when it comes to the Braves. And the best thing of all for you, our listeners who have been so supportive and can't thank you enough, there's only one place for you to come and be able to not only get the news when it happens, but the full breakdown of what it means now, what it means going forward, and how it impacts other moves that are going to be made, because there's going to be plenty of them. That's here on the Hammer Territory podcast.
Yep. And by the way, we didn't mention it. Shout out to Matt Olson. Was elected, or not elected, awarded, I guess is the right word there. Awarded a Gold Glove this evening. MLB, the timing of when MLB drops like award announcements is some of the most random stuff you'll ever see in your life. They did it at like 8:46 on a Sunday night in the middle of an NFL game. Just kind of randomly announced the Gold Glove Awards. Matt Olson won his, much deserved. Matt was fantastic at first base this year. So yeah, shout out to him. I don't have a lot for Gold Gloves. Not a lot of analysis there. Just, he had a really good defensive year. Got awarded for it. So congrats to him. But yes, big takeaway from this show. The next, specifically starting on Thursday, over the next 10 days after Thursday, is going to be a very busy time roster management wise. Roster management stuff I love. It's some the nuts and bolts, the random machinations of roster stuff I really love it. I get into it. So this is one of my favorite times of year, quite honestly. Not when there's not baseball being played, at least. So it's going to be a fun couple days. And then of course, on top of all that, the Braves have an entire coaching staff to build out, including the manager. So there is going to be plenty of news over the next few days.
Is Sonny Gray going to be a Brave by Thursday?
If Sonny Gray is a Brave, I think there's actually a decent chance Sonny Gray is going to be a Brave. So, we would have to throw Scott a party if that. Yeah. Scott's been projecting Sonny Gray for like 5 years to the Braves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean his whole career. But my point, but I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but that's the type of unexpected thing we could see Alex do.
Oh, 100%.
Because then him doing that gives him more certainty of what he's got to work with money wise for the rest of the offseason. So again, the whole thing about having so many questions the Braves need to answer and multiple needs to fill on this roster, you can pivot so many ways. And again, we'll have it all broken down for you. If you're a fan of emergency podcasts, well, hey, you know what? Just like Alex likes to give out extensions, Sauron likes to give out rings, we like to do emergency podcasts. So we'll see you there. Shout out to Tolkien. Sorry, just watched Lord of the Rings for the first time with my son. So until then, go Braves. You can find Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, Foul Territory across all forms of social media. Make sure you stick with us here on the Hammer Territory podcast. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.